enjoyed working with Anne very much. She has created a very warm environment in the classroom, and she brings a very careful eye to everybody's work, and it's been a real personal benefit as a writer to be the recipient of her feedback.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bit.
I agree. I have also really enjoyed working with Anne. I feel like she is she's accessible and attentive and very insightful, and at the same time she will encourage your work, but she is quite firm, so she will also not let you get away with if your gestures aren't right or your characters aren't moving around the space in a certain way. She will push you to kind of raise the bar, so I find that quite helpful, and she's very warm as well, so I think that also helps kind of give a relaxed classroom environment.
I've also really enjoyed working with Anne this semester. She's a wonderful teacher, very inspiring to her students, and I feel like she takes every class and teaches us in general how to be better writers, even using other people's work. So I find that very, very useful, and really enjoyed it.
And she's very funny, which I think is quite important. In regards to my writing, I think she's been the teacher that has made me think most carefully about what my overall project is, not independently of the individual submission of that given day. Some of the probably some of the best office hours that I've ever had was sitting in her office and having her talk to me about some ideas that she had about what my book might look like in the some years from now when that book is actually written. And yeah, it was just, she was very generous that way, like really offering her imagination to me and giving me the courage to think past just individual stories, but what an actual book project might look like. So I'm very grateful to her for that.
I feel the same. I had also very powerful experiences with her in office hours as well as the classroom. I think, I'm an older student for the typical NYU graduate student, and I work in a male-dominated field with a lot of military and police, and I have had some fear about writing about that, or, oh, I can't write about that, or, I'm the odd voice out, and Anne has been especially encouraging of, these are important themes, these are things you can work with, don't tell yourself you can't, shut the voices off. I think your book can be important, the stories are important, so I feel like she also brings a certain attitude and encouragement to her students about, you have to pursue your project, the work is calling your attention, and it's your job to respond, which for me was just like a huge door swinging open. Like, okay, it's my turn, I have a voice, I can use it, and it could be good. So that's been very powerful for me.
I feel like I've definitely learned a lot about writing from Anne and meeting with her in office hours specifically. So I actually met with her yesterday. The last time I went to her office hours, she had said to me, come back with 30 lines about your novel that I'm working on now. And I said, well, when should I come back? She said, when you've written your 30 lines. So I went back yesterday and I said to her, I said, okay, Anne, I have an outline and I have these 30 lines for you. I said, it was really difficult to do. And she said, well, congratulations, that means that you've done it well. And I thought it was a really useful exercise because I was having some issues with structure. And so I think she really just encourages that, us to think out of the box. And that's been very, very useful. So.
I think Anne's approach is a bit different to some of the other writers I've worked with in the past. One of the writers I've worked with the most closely here is Nathan Englander, who's obviously a very acclaimed short story writer and will line edit and push the sentences and the words on the page. And Anne will do the same, but she's also very big picture. She'll go larger, as Sarah mentioned earlier. She'll look at, okay, not just your submission, but let me see what's behind it or what's in front of it. What are we looking at in relation to the larger bigger thing. And I remember maybe 2 weeks ago in class, she said something, we were talking about books and themes, and if you could describe your work, like, this writer meets this writer, or this book meets this book. So it was very helpful to kind of just do these exercises, thinking about being a writer on the page, being a writer in the world, being a writer, in your country. And I remember she left the class just saying, if you're going to write a book, why not write a book that matters, right? Why not take on something big? So she's quite inspiring and different in that way.
I completely agree with Jennifer, and something quite interesting that I found, or in her approach, which I had never seen before, was first off, as I was out with her, she asked me about other writers that I liked, which is a fairly common question, but I think she did that in an attempt to praise me, or rather ask me about how I envisioned myself within a given tradition. So she actually asked me whether I had any Yiddish-speaking relatives, because she felt that in my sentences, and that totally blew me away, because I'd never even considered that as something that might be an influence. And then, of course, when somebody puts that idea in your head, you think, well, but of course, that must be in there. So it was, which is like an interesting thing to think about, and just lovely as a way to kind of trying to place you within like a longer line of writers, which I think is very much tied to what we were talking about earlier, of her giving you permission to see yourself as an inheritor of a tradition, which is something that's, as a young writer, seems presumptuous, and is perhaps presumptuous, but it's nice to have somebody like Anne Enright tell you, oh, you can go ahead and do that. So yeah, that's definitely a very different and distinct thing that I find that she brings to teaching.
Yeah, I think it's she brings a lot of very distinct things to her class, and one thing I really appreciate is, every single class, no matter whose work we're looking at, she sort of draws larger lessons. So somebody was dealing with memory, and she said, what does this teach us about memory in general? Or somebody was writing about, from a female perspective, that was a male writer, and she said, what does this teach us about, gendered perspectives? So I really appreciate that sort of approach to writing in general. So I think that's great. And then she really makes time for her students. She insists everybody comes to meet with her twice. I think I've been in 3 or 4 times, but she's very welcoming, and really has gotten to know our individual projects, which I really appreciate.
In Anne's writing, what I find particularly interesting, I just kind of broke down one of her books, The Forgotten Waltz, and I love the circularity of her writing. I love that she won't traditionally deal with time in a linear way, that she'll kind of start in the event and then move back to the first moment, and then move through to backstory of a character, and then advance back to a scene in a way that I think as a reader, if you're just enjoying a book, it's seamless and you don't notice the kind of technical skill with which she's just moving you back and forth through time. But when you start to study it or break down how she's structured the books, it opens up this whole new way of storytelling, and how can you approach the story you're trying to tell. And I think, as Sarah mentioned, she's very good at seeing your work and saying, okay, this is what happens halfway through, or what happens, right before the ending, or what happens 30 minutes before the event. So she's, for me, quite amazing with time and also precision, the precision of the gestures, the movements of the characters, like they feel very embodied, very real, like, you have no room to doubt, is this a built world or not? It's seamless. And I find that quite elegant and mesmerizing, really.
Yeah. I completely agree with Jennifer, and I think alongside with the precision of her writing, there's a clarity and a freshness to her descriptions that I'm very enamored with. I think my favorite thing to find as a reader is when a writer manages to describe something in a way that is entirely new to you, but that is pointing to something that you recognize immediately. And I think she's a master of that. I wish I could quote a line, be a cool thing for me to do, but I can't remember one exactly. But I mean, if anyone can, you open her book, 2 minutes and you're going to find one of those moments. And I feel quite a high degree of reverence for her ability to do that.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah and with Jennifer. I love Anne's writing, and I think she's a very accessible writer. And she really, you can read anybody can read her work and get something from it, and it really stays with you. She has, some passages that are so haunting, and you sort of wake up thinking about them, and even years afterwards. So it's really great to also be in a class with her and read her at the same time.